just to give you a flavour, on the walls of the museum, we've got the Waggonway story around the walls. So whenever you guys all come down in your hordes to visit us, when you're allowed, there you will see the story of the Waggonway starts back in the 1600s with the Earl of Winton building salt pans, and then it comes right through into the period of industrialisation. And the York Buildings Company, they come along 1719, they get their hands on the estates, and within a few years they decided to build a railway. And it's not really a railway as we would have seen, as we would see today. It's a little wooden railway carrying little trucks of coal down from Tranent. And just to give you an idea of what that would have looked like.
Okay, perfect.
I'm just going to wander outside. It's going to get very bright in a minute. There we go. See if I can. We have made a wagon.
That's fantastic. And you've made that as part of your project?
Yeah, this a couple of years ago. You might remember, and I'm not sure of the legality of this, but a lot of wood came in on the tide. So we decided to put it to good use. There was way too much to go around for people's fences and sheds locally. So
I do remember the occasion. There was a shipment of timber had come off the top of a boat out in the Forth, and washed ashore all across the Forth. Well, it seems to me that you put it to good use.
We certainly did, and it was all nice and weathered and everything. So it's given our wagon a bit of a sort of weathered look as we would have wanted.
So these wagons would have been filled with coal in Tranent, just like this.
Just like that.
And then from the mine at Tranent, and then they'd be what would work next? It would be just gravity would take them down the hill.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're pre-steam engines here. We've got no form of proper of mechanized traction or anything like that. So it's very much a set the wagons loose at the top of the hill with a brakeman sitting on the back, and he is his job is really to control the speed on the way down the hill. Now, we did some excavations. Amongst other things, the Waggonway project, we do archaeology. We're lucky to have Alan Braby, who's our in-house archaeologist and illustrator. He does wonderful illustrations of how the Waggonway would have looked. And so he leads us on the archaeology side of things. And what we did last year was we actually excavated the early part of the railway, where it crosses the battlefield, the Press and Pans battlefield just up the hill. And what we found, and it can be quite hard to interpret if you don't know what you're looking at, but this picture here shows a cobbled trackway buried a metre below the surface. And the picture below, if I can get the right angle, the darker bit where my finger in the photograph is pointing to is the shadowy remains of one of the wooden rails from the early part of the Waggonway. So there are traces left.
So that dates to around about 1722. You think that part there where you got to?
Absolutely, and we actually have dating evidence from within the surface. So we'll go over here. We're getting right into the museum a bit now. We have a little box of finds, which if I can dig these out. So this here, an innocuous little piece of something, but if you get a close look, you'll see it's all bubbly.
Yeah.
And that is actually a piece of waste glass.
Right.
As is this one. Looks a bit more glassy, that one. So you get different, there's a little opaque kind of little piece there. So you get all these pieces were actually embedded in the surface of the cobbled horse track, which we found, which was between the two rails. And in addition, we got this stuff, which those who are familiar with Cockenzie, you see this stuff. The top half of the wall at Cockenzie House is made up of that stuff, and the rumor had it was lava from an Icelandic ship or something like that. but it is in actual fact industrial waste from the furnaces at the salt pans.
Wow.
And so the surface which we had, which was on top of the cobbled horse track, was actually made up of this stuff. So there's lots of pieces of industrial waste built into that. And the glass is actually crucial, because the glass helps us date it back to early 18th century. So we're fairly certain that this is...
This material is coming from the waste material from the industrial processes that are happening in Cockenzie, and then it's being used in walls around the village, and it's being used as track bed, effectively, is it?
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, the horses they have this cobbled surface, and the horses wouldn't want the horses to walk straight directly on the cobbles, so they build it up with ashy, coaly stuff, and they obviously get rid of some industrial waste in there. And that's helped us date that surface, beyond reasonable doubt back to that period. So we're confident we've actually got in situ remains there, and we're going to go back in next year, hopefully, restrictions permitting. Now the glass is interesting. We're literally fresh off a dig that we've done in Cockenzie and Port Seaton. A few weeks ago, we got people to dig in their gardens. It's a good old-fashioned time team style test pits in gardens. And
this was part of September's Scottish Archaeology Fortnight.
It was.
You were one of the main features this year, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the absence of people being able to get out and do stuff that they would normally do, there was normally quite a few digs on the go. We had to kind of rethink it. And linking in with what we've just been talking about with the glass waste, what we were on the hunt for this time was the Port Seaton Glassworks, which we know dates from 1720s and 30s, only operated for 10 years or so. And we did indeed find lots of evidence of this. And then if I hold up bits like this, we're getting the same stuff out of the trenches from our recent dig. So this was really crucial in terms of tying a few of the things together. And this is really what our museum is about. Is it's a kind of active museum. It's always a work in progress. Yes, we have the story of the wooden waggonway being built, and then in 1815 it morphs into the Cadell family. They upgrade it to an iron railway. So it goes through this process of moving with the times, essentially. But we're telling that story, and then we're chipping in with the archaeology to try and tell more of the story which has been lost.
Ed, we've had a question from somebody who's watching, and they've asked, you said that the wagons came down by gravity from Tranent. At what point, when and where did the horses take over? It's
an excellent question. And I was chatting with somebody else just the other day about this. Most of the way down from Tranent, there's a good gradient that would allow the wagons to roll down fairly well under gravity. And the job of the brakesman would be to control the speed. And they wouldn't really, I think it would be very hard to even stop the wagons. If you're thinking about 2-ton wagons, maybe 4 of them hooked together, all coming down, there's a lot of weight, and they move pretty quickly. Now, there is a flat section at the bottom where you get to the bottom of the hill coming into Cockenzie. So at that point, I would imagine that they would have had to attach a horse or two to tow the wagons in past the salt pans and to the harbour. And of course, the empties all get taken back up under horsepower.
Thanks. I think that I mean it is. Do you have a model? I think that Alan made, perhaps showing the mines at the top.
Absolutely. I'm right. Well, I've got a few models which will help illustrate this now.
I mean, we should probably talk really about the industry a little bit. Maybe beginning with the mine working, which is the purpose of why the Waggonway is there.
Yeah, absolutely. East Lothian. There's been mining going on in East Lothian reputedly since the 13th century, if not earlier. Monks of Newbattle supposedly had rights to mine coal down here. But when we fast forward to the era we're talking about here with the Waggonway, very simple shafts going down into the ground. And if I come down here,
oh yeah,
there's a model of the kind of contraption. Trying to get away from the
glare.
That's a bit
that's better. Yeah, we can see that. That's lovely.
So you've got a coal pit in the background with this thing called a coal gin, and it's essentially a sort of a capstan style drum where the horse would walk in a circle, and that would allow the ropes and the pulley system to haul the baskets of coal out of the pit.
And what sort of era are we talking about here?
We're talking 17th and 18th century for this. I mean, I think once we're into the 18th century, this is actually good technology. This is like quite up to date stuff in the 18th century. Whereas previously, the sort of bell pits and things like that had been more the thing. So we have that, and then if I drop down here, this is a model of what the Waggonway would have looked like. You see, we've got the Preston Pans battlefield.
And this is a scene as it would have been 275 years ago last week, in fact.
Absolutely. So you've got that, the Waggonway with all this waste material filling up the gap between the rails, and then a cart track, which we found the wheel ruts for in our dig as well.
That actually showed up in the dig. You could see
wheel ruts. Yeah, absolutely. So we went down through a section. See if I've got a photograph of it here, actually. Possibly not. Went down through a section. We got these lovely U-shaped wheel ruts filled with coal waste, which was really nice because we knew that there were earlier cart tracks in the area, which were used to transport the coal before the railway was built. And while we're here, alongside the 18th century Battle of Preston Pans, then we've got the graduation to an iron railway, slightly narrower gauge. And actually, Alan's put in here the walls, which we have now on the pathway up through the battlefield area. And these are the walls that were built at that time.
So even in this iron era, it's still not horses leading it down. You still envisage in these heavier trucks just gravity.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, they would have actually come down easier because the iron wheels on iron rails is a much smoother medium for rolling under gravity. It would be probably even quicker. But the brakes would have had to be better as well, which we imagine they were. And
while I don't want to dwell on the battlefield because we're here, it's about the industrial archaeology, but I think there will be some people who will be watching. So here we have a Waggonway that bisected the battlefield of Preston Pans, and it's actually mentioned in the accounts of the battle. Is it not?
I think there, from my own memory of the accounts, that I think there are cursory sort of shady mentions of it, but it doesn't appear to be a particularly major feature. I mean, it's there, but it's not an obstacle for a particular obstacle for during the battle.
As the opposing sides, they would have had to cross it with the Jacobite line towards Seaton and the Hanoverian line running across Preston Pans all the way to the edge of Cockenzie, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it splits the landscape perfectly. I mean, I think one of the things that's always intrigued people is that nowadays we've got this high embankment as depicted in the model of the later version, and we've still got that embankment today. In fact, you can see it in the photographs there as well. There's the two walls, and it sits quite high above the fields. And one of the things with the archaeology was to actually establish how much that has been built up over time. So, and we actually established that the original wooden waggonway was a metre or more below the level of the ground today. So we know there's been significant makeup since that time. So what we actually established was that the waggonway itself was not a huge raised feature within the landscape. It was actually more flush with the surface, the level of the fields almost.
And that in itself is remarkable, because what you're doing there is you're changing, because battlefield archaeology is a significant part of the archaeology today. And what you've done there with your excavations you've changed the topography of our understanding of one of the most significant battles in British or Scottish history. So that's quite a remarkable feat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was always something that we hoped to maybe shed some more light on. And I should stress that what we did last year was literally a 1 metre wide trench, just as an exploratory venture. And to actually get the information we did from that little trench, it was quite remarkable. And I think we're all quite excited about the prospect of going back in at some point in the future and opening up a longer stretch of the line. And who knows what it might tell us.
And to tell folk at home, if they want to visit that little stretch, there's a little bit of pathway that leads from Tranent, and you can follow all the way down to Cockenzie.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm going to do is I'm just wandering up the sort of business end of the museum. It's all a bit messy at the moment because we've got archaeological finds waiting to be catalogued and things like that. So there are two things you can do. You can either download that app, which was produced in conjunction with the Preston Pans Battle Trust, and that app guides you with GPS around the battlefield and the waggonway. So you can, if you've got a smartphone, you can easily find your way around. We also have lovely leaflets, which have little maps on there. So you can pick them up at the museum if we're open. So there's various ways to get around.
I mean, we'll repeat these as later on, but you can visit your website, which is 1722 waggonway.org.
.co.uk. So yeah, there's information on there as well, and lots of stuff on our Facebook page. And we're always there to help at the end of an email. So
we've got some more questions that have come in.
Sure,
So after COVID, will you need volunteers to continue your work? What will they have the opportunity to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're always looking for volunteers. One of the things that we do, we have the museum open as much as possible. Usually during the warmer months, that means every weekend. So we always need volunteers for that. We also do a lot of research and project work in the background of all this, because none of the archaeology and all that would be possible without extensive research. We're in the middle of transcribing some early 18th century journals, which mention the Waggonway on numerous occasions, so they're very interesting to us. So we're working on things like that as well. And whenever we do our archaeological digs, we're always looking for diggers. So there's lots and lots of varied things that we can do, and get our volunteers to get involved in.
Do you work with schools when you're doing this? Do you work local schools? Do they get involved? Or
yeah, we do. I mean, when we've been able to do, I mean, this year has been a bit different, obviously, but we've done a big archaeological dig. The last 3 years before that, 2017 was our first. And what we tend to do with that is we get the local schools down they send 2 or 3 classes from each school, and they come down. They get to the chance to do some archaeology. They also get the chance to. We did some last year was great. We had Victorian classroom reenactors, so they got the chance to see what it was like to be at school in the Victorian era. And they also get to help us make some salt as well, with our replica salt pan.
Now, someone's asked a question about how you financed and who's responsible for the archaeology dig. I mean, I helped out with your digs, so I know that it's about friends and it's about. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're essentially self-financed, albeit that can sometimes be a struggle. We apply for grants for various parts of our project where there's a specific, a specific project within what we're doing which requires extra funds. But we essentially are a membership organisation, so we take subscriptions. We also we've got a lot of merchandise that we sell at our museum shop. We run salt making courses at Cockenzie House at our replica salt pan there. So there's various income streams that we've got, and the goal is for the group to be self-sufficient rather than relying on handouts and grants all the time, and rather that the grants are there for funding specific projects rather than just the ongoing operations of the group.
And if anybody wants to join your group, they can just go to your website and take out a year's membership. And how much does that cost? It's
£15 for a year, or for a small discount, you can pay by standing order of £1 a month, and you never notice it going out of your account. So there's quite a few people do that as well.
And that supports all the work that you do, the archaeology work, the community work, the outreach work, the preservation of all of these wonderful artifacts that you've been finding, and just for a pound a month, basically, and you'd never notice it was going out. Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole idea is that it's affordable for people, and that once you're a member, in happier times, we often run, we have members events, evenings here with guest speakers and a few refreshments and things like that. So there's fun to be had as well as all the hard archaeological work.
And I know that during lockdown, you've also been doing online events as well. So there's an opportunity there for members to be getting involved in that. So there's all manner of outreach that you're finding ways to make this work, and you're all volunteers, which is the most remarkable part of all. A community group that's doing this amount of work as volunteers is fabulous.
I mean, it's essentially, I mean, we were very fortunate a few years ago. We had all the right people at the right time to, and with, relevant skills and that kind of thing, that they were able to make it work in the first instance. And then it's gained a bit of momentum as we've gone along, and the result is you'll see from the background, we're essentially in an industrial unit, which we acquired to have a space to build the wagon, and it's evolved into having a fairly extensive exhibition, which is our museum-y bit. We've recently had funding from the local community council and the Rotary Club at Longnidrey to get these lovely display cases where we can show off some of our nice bits of nice finds, and we've got quite a lot of glass in there. While we're looking at the glass, just point of interest, that there is an enormous ingot of waste glass, which was found in a local garden round the corner. So we've got quite a lot of things in here that weren't found on digs, but local people have loaned us them for the display.
So you've now provided a focal point for people to come and share their passion and history for the local heritage as well.
Absolutely, and that's what it's about. The whole thing is designed to, the whole project is designed to get local people and from further afield as well, get people involved in the heritage. This. It's a great story. There's loads of aspects to it, and we really want people to enjoy it and get involved in it. And actually, rather than just looking at stuff in cases, which is all very well, we want people to have the opportunity to get involved and do practical heritage.
Before we return to the individual things, there's been just a couple more questions that I throw in. One person's asked, can a group arrange a tour, paid of course, he adds, out with your usual opening hours?
Yes, absolutely. All you need to do is just drop us an email, and we'll sort out suitable time, and rather than put a price on it, we just, if people want to donate, that's fine. We would do it for nothing, but if you want to make a donation, that's most welcome.
And so if they just go to your website, 1722waggonway.co.uk, they'll be able to find contact.
Yeah, our email address is just on the contact form at the bottom of the page there, so you'll be able to find that.
And then there's another question. I know the answer, but I'll let you. Is there a cafe, toilets, picnic tables for visitors, day trips?
Yeah, I'm at the moment. We don't have a cafe at the museum. There is a wonderful cafe around the corner at Cockenzie House. We work in partnership with them. Our salt pan is in the garden there, but so they've got a cafe which is really handy close by. We've got a toilet at the museum, although given the COVID restrictions and things at the moment, that is only for absolute emergency use. But there are toilets at Cockenzie House as well, which are open all the time.
And Cockenzie House is it's only 100 meters away. It's really not far.
It's a 2-minute walk.
Yeah.
As I say, we've got things there as well. Part of our salt pan operation is there, where we make sea salt.
And I think that's a great
the way
segue.
That we used to be.
That's a great segue, because we've talked about coal. Could we talk maybe a wee bit about salt and a wee bit about glass?
Absolutely. So we've also done excavations on salt pan buildings. But the photographs here, I'll try and angle the camera there. There's one of our excavations. So the red brick structure underneath there is part of a flue system from within the salt pan building, and another one at Cockenzie Harbour. So there's been various excavations we've done in that, and the Waggonway was there to bring coal for the salt. So that's the link we're looking at. If I drop down here, we've got another wonderful model. All these models are made by Alan Brady, our archaeologist. There's no end to his talents, but that is a depiction of what a salt pan would have been like back in the day. And we've built a 1/3 scale replica. So somebody just started a rather noisy engine just outside, so I'm going to wander at the other end. So we made a 1/3 scale replica, and we now make salt on a regular basis, and that's another thing that you can get involved in. There it goes.
So folk can come and they can learn how to make salt with you. And somebody has asked, can we buy your salt? Is it safe to use in cooking?
Well, I have been eating it for the last 3 years, although officially we sell it as souvenirs. We've got little souvenir jars of it there. Yeah, so at the moment we sell it as souvenirs, and what people choose to do with it after that is up to them. Although
but if they come along to
I'm still standing.
If they come along to one of your now I know this because I've helped you carry the water from the Forth and take it up to your salt pan. But if they come along to one of your days, they can make salt from seawater, and by the end of the day they'll have in their hand handfuls of fresh sea salt.
Absolutely. So we had a few weeks ago, we had a trio of friends who came and made salt. It's for a salt making day. It's £20. You get your full experience of making salt, and then once the salt was dried out, then we post out a decent sized package to you for whatever you want to do. To use it for.
As a souvenir, or whatever you choose to do with it.
As a souvenir. I
tell you, £20, I'm not sure you could buy handmade Himalayan salt, a box of it for that price, and you're getting the whole experience of making it from seawater to salt to use as you see fit. That's yeah.
It's do you know what we enjoy doing it. We've got a small team of people who we've probably made salt something like 40 times over the last few years, and it's really a kind of we do it for the love of it, but it's also that selling the souvenir salt is makes a little bit of pocket money for the project as well, as does the running the salt courses. So one thing I would probably add is that we are in the process of we're moving along this winter with the getting the process approved, so that we can at some point sell it as a foodstuff, in bigger packs and that kind of thing. So that's a kind of watch this space.
We'll look forward to it. And this is the remarkable thing, because many people think, if they think at all about the panning for salt, they think about Preston pans. They don't necessarily think about Cockenzie. But your work has shown it as a process. How long do you think it was operating in the village for?
Well, we know that the Earl of Winton built 12 salt pans in 1630 between Cockenzie and the bit of coast between Cockenzie and Port Seton, and they were still they were still operating right the way through, long after the Waggonway was built. Albeit some of them were closed down, but there were still some of the salt pans of those original salt pans, albeit probably modified, were still operating in the 19th century. So there's a whole, the people often think about Preston pans, and rightly so. It was the centre of salt production in the later period, in the 19th and early 20th century. But the centre of salt making in Scotland at the start of the 18th century was Cockenzie. Oh. There were 10% of all the salt made in Scotland came from this quarter-mile stretch of coast,
remarkable,
just a stone's throw from where I am just now. So there's, I'm trying to think. You've probably got a good flavour of what the museum's like. It might be worth just going for a wander along just now, and we can see some of the in situ remains of the salt pans and the Waggonway at the harbour.
That would be fantastic if we could do that.
What I'll do is I'll just shut the doors, and I will take you on a little mystery tour.
Excellent. And this really is, for those that are watching, this really is a flavour of what would happen if you were there today for a traditional Doors Open Day. You'd have arrived, and Ed and the other volunteers would have been able to show you around. So I think we're now going to have a wee wander around and have a look at some of the remains that are in the area nearby.
Locking the door there. So this is where we are. We're in West Harbour Road, just next to this new development, which is where the old boatyard was at Cockenzie Harbour. Probably worth noting while we're here, the red plaque on the wall behind me is our newest addition to the museum, newer than the office. It is the National Transport Trust have awarded the Waggonway a red wheel plaque, which is recognition of the Waggonway being a nationally important site of transport heritage.
I understand there are only 4 in Scotland in total. So
yeah, we're the 4th one. Yeah,
that's a remarkable achievement. Well done.
Absolutely. Apologies in advance if there are any gusts of wind which affect the sound.
I see your archaeology neighbours there as well.
Yeah, we've got CFA Archaeology, our newest neighbours here. Always nice to have archaeological people around the corner. So
we're already at the sea. That's how close you are.
This is the harbour. So the building behind me here, the cream-coloured building with the balcony, is Mr. Caddell's office.
That you've recreated?
Absolutely. So we're just walking around past the harbour here. There's got a fair bit of activity on here. Some of the boat holders are out today. It's a lovely day.
So the harbour we're seeing behind you is this Stevenson Harbor, is it?
Yeah, this was modified by. I say modified. There was a quayside. The bit you see just the bit you see just here. There was a quayside of sorts here from much earlier, 1630, along with the salt pans, and yet it was destroyed during the 17th century, but seems to have remained in use for quite some time. Port Seton Harbour was then built, and the Waggonway originally went to Port Seton Harbour, and then Stevenson comes along 19th century and does an upgrade and puts in the piers that actually form the biggest part of the harbour as it is today. Now the road where it's coming down, that's the route of the 19th century iron part of the Waggonway that came down here.
So
the wooden one actually went along to Portseaton Harbour instead.
So that would have headed all the way, there would have been iron all the way up to Trinent from that line.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about, I think I worked it out once as something like 6,000 individual fish belly rails and stone sleeper blocks. So if we're walking down the route of the Waggonway here, and we'll go and see if we can find some of these in situ remains, which we found in one of our digs. And for once, I've actually brought a trowel with me, so if they have been covered over, I can uncover them again. Just the part where I'm walking here is underneath all that dirt is a turntable and tipper mechanism, as designed by Robert Stevenson. Right. So if I turn the camera like this, can you see that?
We can indeed. So
what
are we looking at here?
There are the fixings. That is a fixing for a rail. Not sure how easy that was to see, but
no, we can see that nice and clear. So what we were looking at there was am I calling that a sleeper? Was that a?
Well, that's a sleeper block with the remains of an iron chair in it. It's actually one here. That one's still got the iron chair in it,
and the
rail would have run through this way. There's actually a bit of the rail still left in it. So that's
like a clasp into which the rail would have been held, running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Running down. And
absolutely.
And so these were all uncut. Now I helped for I think 2 days a few years ago. So, but your volunteers have uncovered this line going down onto the pier behind you there.
Absolutely, and I think you yourself excavated a trench just under where that van is there.
Indeed,
yeah. So there's bits of industry all the way along this coast. So if you look up, basically there were salt pans. There are at least 5 of them on this little stretch between here and the British Legion building over there. And then on the rocks behind me, just where the tide's actually coming in, it's hard, you can't see it at the moment, but there's one of the original bucket pots where they collected seawater in a hollow in the rocks, which they widened out themselves. You could get thousands and thousands of gallons of water. Once the tide recedes, there'll be a lovely pool of water there. And from there, it was transferred into the salt pan buildings where they then boiled it with the coal furnaces.
And and where you're standing just now, so in that little stretch, there were five salt houses between there and that modern building.
Yeah, I mean, there were actually some underneath that as well. There was at least 2 underneath where the British Legion is, just up at the top of the hill there. So this is when we actually dug down into that nearest section there, which we saw in some of the photographs at the museum, and that was that revealed that at least 2 meters of standing remains, the walls, still survive beneath that bank over there.
And that's the most remarkable part, is that if you come down to the sea today, you have no real evidence because they're under car parks, they're under tippings. So it's a whole area that we're just unaware of when we visit these coastal sites.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing we're very lucky with here, and I think which has actually helped the project in many ways, is that there hasn't been significant development around this harbour. A lot of these early industrial sites, they tend to get lost under larger quayside and dock developments and things like that, or they're just lost to the sea entirely.
Perhaps before you go any further, you could tell us maybe a wee bit about that building behind you, the one that you just passed.
Absolutely. The one, you mean the one with the boat in front of it?
Yes, that's been lopped off. That's sitting there, looking a little bit sad. But you might not quite realise when you pass it its significance.
Yeah, we'll go back down. It's an interesting one. This is a. We assume it was one of the the early buildings related to the 17th century harbour, and the style of it hints at that. The top of it has been lopped off.
Yep.
And there's a nice photograph, I think, of the Cockenzie and Port Seaton box meeting around about 1900 or thereabouts, where the building is in its complete state. Now, the red brick one behind it, that is obviously new, but the foundation it sits on is much older. And in fact, the foundation that the red brick building sits on is probably older than the one that's nearest to us.
So what we have there is a 17th century building at its core, looking in a little bit of a sorry state. But
yeah, it's a wee bit the worse for wear at the moment. But we remain hopeful that someone will do something good with it at some point, because it would be a shame for it just to be lost to time, you know. So it's quite important that there's a focus on the harbour, because it does need a little bit of TLC.
It does.
So part of what we are trying to do is celebrate the history surrounding that, in the hope that some good will come of that.
We've had a question. Was the coal from Tranent primarily brought down there for the salt pans, or was it also shipped out from that harbour? So
originally, it was almost exclusively for the salt pans. Although we do know that the coal was the poorer quality coal was burnt in the salt pans, but the very good quality coal was shipped out, and latterly that became more and more of the case as they exposed deeper seams and better quality coal. It was shipped out, yeah. So a mixture really. Now I'm just walking up here because you see the wall of Cockenzie House. That's got all the clinker on the top of it.
Oh yeah, that's the dark line that we can see behind you there.
Yeah, and I've come up here because if you are out walking up and down the Waggonway, there are clues in the built landscape that you can spot. So this wall, that is a sleeper block, and you can see it's got two fixings.
So it does.
For the iron chair. So there's several stones of similar size in the top of this wall, and these are the sort of things where you can actually do a bit of detective work when you're out on a walk near an old railway, and you can find these things in the built landscape. So I'm just doing a little circuit round and then back to the museum as well.
And that's where our ancestors will reuse everything. So once the railway is gone out of use, that's a lovely bit of dressed stone, and it's going to be reused, turned on its side, turned upside down.
Yeah, I mean, they were too good not to use again. You know, and people back in the day were far better at recycling than we are today, I think. So nothing was wasted.
And that's something sadly we do see often at the coast, where building rubble can sometimes, even today, is being pushed into the sea, whereas previously it got put into walls again and was reused again, time and again.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we head back around the corner to the museum, you'll notice the wall where I am just now. As I walk this way, there's a bit of a dog leg in it.
Yeah.
This is the turning point here, and the reason being that this wall used to carry on out roughly to where the middle of the road is there, and do a normal right-angled corner. And when they built the 19th century iron railway and rerouted the Waggonway down this way, they locked the corner off their garden. So that was the Cadell family that obviously owned Cockenzie House, and they were doing the work on the Waggonway. And in order to get the Waggonway down in a straight line down here and down to the harbour, they just locked the corner off their garden. So there's a funny angle in the wall at Cockenzie House.
Remarkable.
And so there are clues everywhere you look at. It might appear that there's nothing left, but there are definitely clues.
And the one thing that was particularly amazing, I'm looking at that wall behind you, it looks like a Christmas cake in layers. Yeah. And that top layer is a sign of the industrial past. They've heightened the wall by using industrial waste.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, they must have had piles and piles of it lying around, and we find it within our archaeological trenches at the salt pans as well. There's just piles and piles of this this waste that comes out of the furnaces, and the reason it comes out is when you burn poor quality coal, and there's a lot of other minerals in it, you get this bubbly clinker that gets produced, and the worse your coal is, the more there is, the more of this stuff comes out. So
it's used in
avoiding some of our local characters.
It's used in higher status buildings as well. Yeah, I mean, we see it at New Hales, built into the Shell Grotto there. We see
Absolutely.
it. And as you said earlier, you mentioned earlier when you were talking to us that it was giving the impression of volcanic activity, but in actual fact, it was a very clever use by 18th century architects to build it into features to give it this high status feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the confusion at Cockenzie has come about because there is actually a grotto within the garden at Cockenzie. And so I'm just opening the museum door again, just on a full circuit. There is a grotto in the garden at Cockenzie which is built of lava. so there's and it does look fairly similar to the untrained eye, but to most people's eyes, really, you would look at it and assume it was the same stuff. But certainly closer examination reveals that lava for the grotto and then clinker for the walls.
Clever. We're almost at the end of the hour. It's been an amazing tour. There's another couple of questions.
Sure. Yeah.
What is your museum dog friendly?
Absolutely. Yeah, we love dogs. There's a bowl of water even for them. So. And
are there any issues with ramps or uneven surfaces that those with mobility issues would have to be aware of?
No, we don't really have any. Admittedly, our little toilet that we've got here isn't the easiest to get into for folk with mobility issues, but to access the actual museum itself, we've got ramped access from the street, so that's easily negotiated.
Fabulous. So before we finish up, can you tell folk your website and your Facebook again, just so that they can get in touch with you? Yeah,
so our website is actually in the background of the picture.
So it is perfect. Look at that.
22waggonway.co.uk. And basically you can contact us via that. We put a lot of things on Facebook. We've got a big Facebook following who love to see our various videos and things that we make. And yeah, there's always events. We're always planning something else, and we're always looking for more subscribing members. So if it's the sort of thing you're interested in, and you want to support some local heritage, £1 a month or £15 for the year, whichever you chooses. I think that's for me. That's it would be great to have more members, and it all helps take the project from strength to strength.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the work that you do, in the local community, and to provide a focal point for heritage again is just quite remarkable. Thanks so much, Ed, for showing us around the museum this morning. I really, really do appreciate it. I'm sorry we've not had our traditional Doors Open Day experience, but you have sure as heck given us the closest possible experience you could have by taking us not just around the museum, but also around some of the local archaeology as well. So thanks so much for that. We'll have more live events here from the Cockburn Association as the day progresses. We'll be back again at 1 p.m. broadcasting live with a discussion with Oliver Barrett, who was the association's secretary from 1972 to 1992. And he'll tell you about 30 years of Doors Open Days. So thanks again to Ed at the Waggonway Museum. If you are watching this live on Facebook, we'll put our details for his Facebook page on there, so you can head over to the 1722 Waggonway and start subscribing. Thanks again, Ed. Cheers now.
Cheers, thanks very much.